Happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Crypto with English. And I'm sure for anybody who's been watching the news lately, it's certainly an exciting year so far. And I certainly anticipate it to continue in that direction as well. But I'd like to introduce a very special guest today, somebody who I would certainly view as a genuine Renaissance woman in this space as well. She wears many hats and does many things. She's the co-founder of the British Blockchain and Frontier Technology Association. She's also the chair of the board of directors at Kasei Holdings, and she's also an author. She is the ambassador of the FinTech Diversity Radar, advisor to the Kerala Blockchain Association, Africa Blockchain Association, for excellence in Novum Insights. I'd like to welcome Dr. Jane Thomason. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you and your listeners.
Greatly appreciate that. I think one of the more understated aspects of blockchain, but I think one that is gaining more prominence as time goes on, is really the potential, and you could almost say the bridge that it creates for unbanked populations across the world. This can be in the United States and North America. This could also be overseas in different parts of Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and so on. And I know that discussing and expanding upon, uh, I guess you could say, expanding this technology into unbanked populations is one of your, I think, passions and one of the, I think, one of your interests. So I was wondering if you could talk about that for a little bit. And where are we right now in 2022 with all these things that are going on?
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, so I just want to take a step back and say that my interest in blockchain was piqued by my realization that it was going to potentially have a profound impact on people like the unbanked, on people in humanitarian emergencies, on people in remote and outlying areas, and for the bottom of the pyramid, if you like. And so that's why I got interested in blockchain, because I realized what potentially it could do. So in terms of financial inclusion, which is something that we actually really saw accelerate during the pandemic, because people got locked down. They couldn't go to the
Right.
banks. They couldn't go to the money merchants. And so they had to start using mobile money of different forms. And we now have a situation in the world where 70% of the population have access to mobile phones. And so this means that potentially 70% of the population can have access to the economic system, because it's estimated there's about 2.5 billion people who don't have bank accounts. But if you can have a wallet on your mobile phone and you can send and receive money using your mobile phone, it almost makes the unbanked a redundant term, because you don't need a bank
Sure.
account. You can do those things on your phone. And so what we've seen, particularly in Latin America and Africa and India and places like that, an escalation in the use of different sorts of cryptocurrencies, blockchain remittance providers, because many people were living on remittances from their relatives, and even blockchain for foreign currency transfers for people who needed to be able to buy things from other countries. So, it's certainly showing its growth, and particularly its growth in emerging markets. And if you look at Chain Analysis's report on, the geography of crypto, you're going to see in the top 20 countries with the populations who use crypto, they're nearly all emerging markets.
Right. And there's certainly a natural either a flexibility or a greater ability for adaptation. I think the top five countries would be like areas such as Vietnam, Philippines, Nigeria, and probably until recently, many parts of Eastern Europe.
Well, and don't forget Latin America. They're
Right.
moving really quick as
Yeah, I
well.
believe
But yeah,
Peru is
no,
on the
you've got
list as
some of the big
well.
ones.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
sure. So I would imagine, I think in emerging economies, there probably isn't such a either a reliance for traditional financial services, probably both either intentionally and unintentionally.
Well, but you see, you've got to understand that a lot of the poorest people in the world don't have what they need to be able to meet the requirements to open a bank account,
Right.
like an identity, for example, or an address or a utility bill, and all these things that the banks want us to provide. So
Right.
they've been excluded, and there's some, great projects going on. One that I'd like to mention is
Please do.
by Hived Online, and what they're doing is helping women's cooperatives in Niger and other countries in Africa essentially digitize the savings cooperatives and allow them to lend and borrow and grow credit scores using digital assets. And so this is advantaging them
Oh
in a
wow.
whole lot of ways and giving them access to the economy that they never had. And this is like really people at the bottom of the pyramid, and they're the stories that are most powerful for me and most exciting, because people in remote areas and people in villages have been absolutely excluded from financial services, and we're seeing a growth in their access to financial services, but not just financial services, because as depending on what connectivity they've got access to the information of the internet, which will allow them, for example, to sell their products online
Right.
and different things that weren't possible before. And I want to mention, because it was one of the real landmarks of the pandemic, was the explosion of play to earn games. But it first
Yes.
came to our um, notice in the Philippines with Axie
Right.
Infinity, where people were literally playing these games to earn enough money to feed their families when Philippines was locked down. And obviously, this was incredibly important, partly because they fed their families, but partly because I think it was a realization for us that we can create new economies and new jobs that never existed before. And that's what's actually, sort of been spawned by this. And there's, a whole growth in the play to earn games outside of the Philippines, in African countries and South American
Right.
countries and Vietnam. But I mean, a word of caution, because I think we have to approach blockchain and decentralized finance with open eyes. I also think what we saw then was the corporatization of play to earn games with the Axie scholars, because it started off
Sure.
just with games, allowing people to use the Axies and pay a proportion of the winnings. But now we've seen multiple corporations absolutely trying to grow the people, the scholars, but also take greater proportions of their winnings from them. So I just think we have to watch out for that, because we're all about democratization and,
Right.
open access. And if we have kind of corporates coming in and, I guess, gouging the benefits, it doesn't seem quite as good to me.
Right, and and of course, based on that, you almost see kind of you could say the typical trappings of, maybe you could say, very, very one-sided corporatism bleeding into some of these areas that are showing, great potential, especially as far as the Philippines and the rest of Southeast Asia, and kind of these play-to-earn gaming ecosystems emerging. It's quite impressive, and I think it's very, very promising. Beyond that, do you find play to earn, uh, in this phenomenon? I guess you could say this parallel economy that we see emerging. Do you see this also spreading with the same amount of zeal to, let's say, the UK or North America, or Australia? No,
No, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because I think the rewards are not large enough to be that attractive to
I see.
people in developed economies. I think where it's attractive, because if you look at the amount of money that the gamers might have been earning in the Philippines, you could have been something like $300 to $400 a week. I don't think that that's enough to drive a gamer who could probably already, earn six-figure
Sure.
sums or something to do it. But nevertheless, what you have is vast numbers of people who could really benefit from that kind of income. So the other thing that I believe, and I'm not technical, is the danger with the play to earn games is that they become less interesting for the gamers. So I think there's work to be
That's
done on the
interesting.
token economy, so that the value of the token doesn't go down as more people play. which what we saw with the Safe Love token from Kasei, but also that the games stay interesting enough so you're keeping the people on the network and playing them. So I think this is not the solution, but it's the beginning of a very interesting economy. But then that is being followed now by the, earn to learn, earn to exercise, all
Right.
of these other kinds of things that potentially people can earn for and be rewarded for are kind of spawning from this approach. So I think it's super interesting. And I was only writing a paper for a journal last week, which was about whether we could use that whole reward and gaming and earning for people who have chronic disease, obesity, and so forth, to reward them for getting fit or for improving their diet
Right.
or achieving their health goals. And there's a project called Sweatcoin that I read about, which is just that, trying to reward people for doing exercise. And with the wearables, you're able to monitor quite closely what people are doing. So it's a really interesting development, both in terms of people being rewarded and earning money for achieving things, but also for creating a healthier community.
Yeah, and I have to say this, that is also very highly promising as well. I think gamifying certain aspects of our everyday lives could be that extra jolt to our reward systems in our brains to kind of get us going. And even just beyond, exercise, this could even be just doing your chores or just doing your errands, as you're going about, during the week. And, one of the major, I guess you could say, points with blockchain is its relationship to the environment, and also in light of climate change and everything that's going on. And often I think skeptics, cynics, detractors will often point to, I guess you could say, the vast amount of energy that needs to be expended, the vast amount of electricity, if you will, to power a lot of these processes. Now, granted, there are many, many blockchains that have almost, and not in an absolute sense, made that point moot. But I do find it very ironic where, let's say, if, for example, you take the U.S. Federal Reserve, and I guess you could say the process of smelting coinage and printing notes. I would imagine those processes alone, using various types of either standard or even rare earth metals, and then the ink, and then the paper processing for all that, that has a very, very tangible cost on the environment. And it seems like more and more we're moving away from the fiat hard currency world, to say the least. I think it's almost inevitable. There is going to be decentralized currency that's going to be greatly, you could say, greatly occupying our everyday lives.
Well, look, I think what you're trying to demonstrate, and you're quite right, is first of all, let's put this into context. So if you compare, the energy usage, and let's face it, we're talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum largely.
Right.
As you say, there's Solana, Algorand, Cardano, Celo, all of these chains that have gone green. So you're saying, how do we reduce the energy footprint of Bitcoin and Ethereum? But also, I think that you've got to say, as you're comparing it with the creation of fiat money, but with manufacturing, with logistics, with
Sure.
livestock and so forth. So you've got to people talk about it in the singular as if this is the single biggest impact on the environment in the world, which it's not. But having said that, I think it's incumbent upon our industry that the miners go and find alternative sources of energy and try and reduce their energy footprint. And we know
Right.
Ethereum's trying to generate Ethereum 2.0, which is going to, have a lower energy footprint. So I think we need to um, highlight how people are trying to change. And then the third point that we need to talk about is the different ways in which blockchain is going to be able to accelerate and improve climate action, whether it's around the tokenization of green finance or
Right.
whether it's things like the games to reduce your own personal climate footprint, and there are several of those around, or whether it's the tokenization of carbon offsets, and there's a number of different projects that are working on that, and also games, NFT related games, to encourage people to do climate positive actions. So I think we should look at the whole picture together. and not just, and I've been to so many conferences where people just start the panel, well, we've got to talk about the energy footprint of blockchain. It's
Sure.
sort of like, yes, but let's put it in context, and then let's look at the other actions that are taking place that also need to complete the whole picture.
Right, and I think that's very well said. And I think, like you said, we have to apply a certain context to this. And I would say this: I guess if you look at the batting average, so to say, of you could say the strides towards green energy within blockchain versus you could say the strides towards, you could say, a greener environment through, you could just say, the industrial revolution, from 200 years onward. Blockchain by far and wide is achieving that faster, and has also been, I guess you could say, over the span of time, also less damaging. Mind you, it's been around for a far lesser time, but like I said, comparing the two, it's like, I think blockchain will get there in a very, very reasonable, expedient way.
Well, I think what we need to get better at is working with researchers and academics to get the science out, to get the data to prove that, because it's not a surprise to anyone that blockchain is an industry that's been full of hype and huff and puff and hyperbole.
Sure.
And so we can
Yeah.
also, we all say that blockchain is going to change the world and, we're going to
Sure.
decentralize everything. But I think the point, to your point, is let's get some hard data from reputable sources that show this to be true. And that's why, I'm on the editorial board of Frontiers in Blockchain and Journal of Metaverse, because these are scientific journals that get academics and researchers writing papers which are looking at governance of DAOs or the energy footprint of the different blockchains, all the different consensus mechanisms and so forth, because that's how that will give us legitimacy, and people will trust us because we've got a credible third party supporting us with what we say. And I think we need to do
Right.
more of that and be better at that.
Agreed, and very well stated. And I was wondering if you could kind of expand upon Kasei Holdings and some of the things you're working on, and how that venture started.
Yeah, well, okay. So let me tell you, I first heard about Bitcoin in 2010. My son told me to buy some, and I didn't buy any. And then he came back in 2016 and asked me if I bought any, and told me how much it was worth. And he said, look, you've got to learn about blockchain because it's going to change everything. And so I started learning about blockchain. And in 2017, I bought my first Bitcoin and Ethereum and, had a wallet. But you know what happened to me then? I lost my wallet. I lost my phone. I lost my seed phrase. I got
Oh, I
another
see.
wallet. I lost that. There are some people who just shouldn't be allowed to try and own their own digital assets. And so I realized that, for people maybe like me, my generation, or just people who don't want to look after their wallet and look what's going on in markets, there needs to be another way that they can participate in this asset class. And first I heard about a company called Icoinic, which is a regulated fund in Amsterdam on the stock exchange there. And I actually invested some money in them because I thought, good, like they can look after it for me. I don't have to worry about it.
Sure.
And then I was approached by some, I was introduced, let's say, by some ex-derivatives traders from London who, again, recognised the need for sort of like mums and pops and aunties and uncles and people who didn't grow up in the digital age, who wanted to put money into digital assets, and institutional investors too. And they saw the need and the opportunity to establish a regulated investment fund that people could buy shares in, just like you can buy shares in a managed trust.
Sure.
And so when they spoke to me about that, of course, it resonated with my experience, which was just of losing all the digital assets I ever had because I couldn't look after a wallet or a seed phrase. And I thought, yeah, there's a place for this where people can put their money in. It's regulated, they know it's safe, and there's an investment team whose job it is to figure out the best way to invest their money. So in short, I was excited to join them, and we listed on the Aquis Stock Exchange in London in November last year.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. And you're based out of, Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And, as somebody who's very, very excited and fascinated, especially with that region, the leadership seems very, very forward thinking. 5, 10, 20 years into the future when it comes to Web3 and blockchain technology. I was wondering if you could talk about your experience living there and collaborating with different organizations and people, and kind of what the general vibe is over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I didn't intend to go and live in Dubai. I left Australia last October because I objected to being locked down in Australia.
Sure.
And I had a, kind of not a round the world ticket, but a ticket to London, stopping in Dubai. And there was a bunch of blockchain conferences on in October. So I thought, okay, I'll spend October there. I'll go to these conferences. I'll, do some speaking. I'll meet some people. And I was really blown away by what I saw. Just first of all, the extent to which the government's gone out of its way to attract technologists and companies there. They're offering
Right.
100,000 golden visas, which are 10-year visas for
Right.
software developers to come there. They're offering incentives for startups to come. They were offering two, I'm going to call it a digital nomad style of visa. They recognized during the pandemic that there'd be digital nomads in countries that probably were suffering a bit with the pandemic come to Dubai. And so as a result, they've attracted so many big and small firms. Binance and FTX have come. They have
Sure.
the blockchain center. They've recently bought land in Decentraland to set up the regulator in the metaverse. So, you know, it's a very exciting environment there. And there are so many conferences. It's come to the point, honestly, and probably all the people at Consensus will die when I say this. Someone said to me, "Are you going to Consensus this year?" And I said, "Why would I? Everyone comes to Dubai now. If you're in Dubai and you're at one
Absolutely.
of the conferences, all of the big names come there." And from that point of view, it's incredibly exciting. There's metaverse, DeFi, NFT events literally every week, and major significant conferences. And, a government that is just embracing the possibilities of technology. It's a very exciting time.
Yeah, to say the least. And I guess, as the phrase goes, all roads lead to Rome. It really appears to me the UAE and Dubai is Rome, perhaps in that regard, as it comes to blockchain. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I came across this in my research, but apparently the government, within Dubai has actually migrated, I guess you could say, a lot of their utilities, and I guess you could say, you know, um, offices onto Hyperledger. Does that sound about right?
Well, I think Dr. Marwan, who is the leader of the Dubai Blockchain Center, and he has been for many years, they were out there with their blockchain strategy in 2015 or 2016, and aiming to make Dubai paperless. And they've just
Wow.
been moving ahead with many, many different innovations, and they really are, quite futuristic and quite inspired. And you build this amazing city out of the desert in 50 years,
Right.
and you've got the openness to building this kind of technological future, then possibilities are endless. And then just next door, you've got Saudi Arabia, which is also trying to, kind of come
Right.
out and internationalize, and they're creating these big economic zones. They're building $1 billion metaverse in Neom. And it's again, the whole region is becoming very, very exciting in terms of technological possibilities.
Yeah, and just to kind of throw in a movie reference there, I look at Dubai and it's almost reminiscent of something like Blade Runner, or like The Fifth Element, and some of those I think kind of more classic movies back in the day. And listen, maybe it's just hubris from a cultural point of view, but I would have thought that, let's say, New York or London or one of those, you could say, traditional major commercial centers would have made it there first. And it seems like, as you mentioned, within 50 years, Dubai essentially almost came out of nowhere and has established itself as, really the tech hub, the tech portal of the foreseeable future. I kind of wonder sometimes, where is it that, let's say, areas like New York or, let's say, London, more or less kind of dropped the ball on this. Whereas, it seems like other areas of the world seem to be very either much more adaptable or flexible, or something's going on.
Well, I'll tell you what I've seen that I think is a significant difference, and I'm not going to necessarily agree with you that New York and London have dropped the ball, but they've got a lot more regulation and forces working against them to be able to
Sure.
achieve, the sort of technological innovation. But what I think is really kind of the essence of somewhere like Dubai is that the majority of the population are not from Dubai. They've come there because
Right.
they want to make a better life. Like there are no hopers, drug addicts, dole bludgers, none. Everyone's there because they're trying to make a better life. So there's this kind of foment
I
of
see.
excitement and trying and effort. Then everyone comes from all around the world. So you have this incredible cultural and social diversity, which you have some diversity in New York and London, but nothing like this. And so people are
Right.
coming from different environments and, they have different ideas about how to solve problems. And I think that that's an incredibly rich intellectual environment. And then the third point, of course, is that, obviously it's an oil-rich region, and so there's money
Right.
to invest if it's something that they want to do. But I think it's those factors. And then plus, within 5 hours flight, they're in the middle of the world. That's why it's called the Middle East. They're surrounded by
Right.
some of the biggest, most populous countries in the world. And a lot of
Sure.
the people who are in Dubai are coming, you can fly to India, you can fly to Africa, you can fly to Jordan, you can fly to Spain. And so you're bringing all of that and those thoughts and ideas and the challenges. So I believe that the growth in crypto last year in the Middle East was 1,800%, whereas globally it was
Wow.
800%. So they're really kind of embracing and going with this.
Sure. It seems like in that region of the world, there's certainly almost an absence of apathy, and it seems like most people who go there are already very self-motivated, and at least I think passionate about, let's say, pursuing whatever you could say enterprise or entrepreneurial based dreams that they have, to say the least. Yeah,
Absolutely. People go there to make a better life from themselves, from the security guards and the cleaners to the tech startups to the people who come to professional services firms. And it really encourages that kind of drive, ambition, and innovation. In a way, I imagine it's like, the early days of the US when people
yeah,
came and they were going to,
that's right.
find gold or find a fortune or build
Yeah,
something.
the gold
And
rush
I
on the
think it's
West
the
Coast in the
same,
1800s.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's that same spirit, and it's palpable and exciting when you're there because everyone you talk about is going, "I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Do you want to know about this?" And it
Oh,
really
that's
is a
wonderful.
buzz.
Yeah, and and especially somebody who's a history nerd, I look at essentially what's going on in the UAE, and it is reminiscent of, let's say, the gold rush in the West Coast in the U.S., or you could say, the huge Wall Street and banking boom in New York from like the end of the 19th century and onwards as well. So it's very very promising to see that that area seems to be a giant connector for people from all different parts of the world, and it seems like a very almost very positive environment too. It seems like there's some sort of synergy where I think if you have all these people with a very similar orientation towards being very industrious and trying to make a better life, I think people who are like that will only build off each other over time. So I would imagine networking must be awesome over there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what I've found, I actually started two groups, one for people who are interested in blockchain and social impact. And that's grown to several hundred people in the course of a few months. And about 3 weeks ago, we had a whole conference which was we called Halal Verse, and part of it was about sort of embracing the Islamic population into blockchain, but it was all about impact. And then there's another group that I started, again, because it was sort of seeing possible gaps, was going to Saudi and being contacted by two young Saudi blockchain engineers, women, because the women are able to be out and about, but the structures to support and mentor and enable them don't seem to be there. So I
Right.
spoke to a few people and said, look, let's make a group so that, we can support Arab women in tech in this region and give them a boost and encourage them with what they're doing. So, I think there's a lot of these networks going on. They're just two that I got involved in starting, but I'm involved in other ones. And they're all super active, like, come to this meetup, we're doing this here, we're doing that there. It's very active.
That's wonderful. And in your opinion, how do you feel that blockchain, metaverse, and Web3 related projects can further encourage, let's say, inclusion of more women within tech? It seems like there's been some strides and progress, so far. However, going forward, like, how do you envision, let's say, blockchain perhaps either reaching that or maybe perhaps almost reaching it?
Well, look, I think you've got to look at it in a couple of different ways. So, in terms of technology being an attractive industry for women to work in, I think there's no doubt about that because it's really flexible. You can work on a 24-hour basis. You can still go and pick up your kids from school if that's what you
Sure.
want to do. But I think that, to some extent, women have seen barriers both in terms of understanding the tech, having the courage to kind of go to conferences and meetups without, being shy or feeling that they don't know. And
Right.
a lot of people show the data about the lack of VC funding for women startups. And I think it's a journey in a way because and there are a number of groups like Lavinia Osborne in London with
Oh yes.
Women in Blockchain Talks, and then
Yeah,
you've
I know.
got the
Yeah.
Women in Blockchain Network, which started in New York with Tessie Moraine from Consensus, and then grew all around the world. Sometimes women need safe spaces to go and be
Sure.
embarrassed and say, listen, I don't know how to do this. And these groups are growing all the time. But my own view very strongly is that we need to develop, and there are many, and showcase women role models who've just done it, who are doing awesome
Right.
projects, who are leading different aspects of the work, and let young women see that there are women leaders in the field. And personally, I don't think that that's like having the token Women in Blockchain panel at a conference. I think it's all about just making sure that you get awesome women doing keynotes and speaking on panels, not talking about the fact that they're women, but and not just women, diversity in general.
Right.
You just seeing every kind of person who's up there who's doing amazing things, and you can see that it's, a kind of panoply of all of the different types of people that exist in the universe. Because the other thing you see all the time is, the 10 top people in blockchain, they're all white from America. Like, really? So I think we have to get a bit
Right.
more global about it as well.
Right. And by the way, I think almost as far as a messaging point of view, if let's say blockchain and the various aspects of the metaverse and Web3 is supposed to be a new frontier to everybody, I certainly don't want to see the same faces, let's say, occupying the headlines for that. Because even from where I'm standing, I'm kind of wondering, is this a good old boys club? Is this just going to be friends of friends who are going to kind of be opening the door for each other, and at the expense of you know everybody else, women and men, regardless of geographic location. So even looking at that, it's like I kind of wonder. I'm like, I hope this isn't going to be more of the same, because I think we do need greater inclusion. Period. And I think maybe where we've gotten to in history, perhaps one of the major symptoms of, let's say, many of these problems is that maybe we have too many echo chambers. And I think that's kind of the problem maybe with certain industries. It becomes cloistered. You surround yourself with the same types of people, you get the same types of opinions, and almost either intentionally or unintentionally, you surround yourself with, yes men or yes women. And then what happens is you don't really see the punches coming, because you're just hiring your friends all the time, effectively.
Well, look, I think that we all need to work hard for that, but we've certainly seen a lot more women coming into the NFT space. That
Yeah.
seems to be, something that women are embracing and doing a lot. And there's loads of collections being led by women and being
Right.
about women. So, I think that there will be spaces. I think that potentially in the metaverse as well, because you're talking about immersive spaces where people can go and do different things. And I think that some of them will be naturally attractive to women. And I'm already seeing several metaverse companies that are led or substantially led by women. So I think
Right.
that we're going to see that more because it's also women being involved in things that women are interested in, which might not be, playing World of Warcraft and running around and shooting people, but definitely going shopping with your avatar is going to be a super cool experience that women are going to want
Sure.
to do. So, I think part of it is the tech and the participation in the tech something that women see benefit in. And one of the areas that I speak about increasingly is what we're going to see with metaverse in health and education and chronic disease and so forth, which again, these kind of more nurturing, caring, service oriented things, I think are going to attract more women as well.
Very, very well said. And I know one of the ribbons, or rather, one of the accomplishments you have in your background is that you're on the editorial board for the Journal of Metaverse. So, what I wanted to know is, as far as the metaverse and the future ahead, how do you see industries being scaled and transformed? Let's say healthcare or social media, for instance. How do you see like those two type of industries being transformed and augmented, or you could say revolutionized even through
Well, let
through
me
this?
let me talk about healthcare, but but
Sure.
but also to say what I'm seeing is increasingly many industries starting to sit up and say, how is this going to affect us? What do we have to think about? Is there something about our business model that needs to change? So
Right.
I think we're seeing it in many industries. But let me talk about healthcare first. So I think there's a whole lot of different ways that potentially the metaverse is going to be able to improve the quality, expand the possibilities, and expand the services, because healthcare is something where there's a shortage of health workers, there's a shortage of money, and so forth.
Very much
And
so.
so if we start
Yes.
off by, looking at collaboration. So scientific discovery and research usually involves collaboration from people all around the world. And traditionally, how this has been done is you'd fly 50 or 100 people all to some central point in Geneva where WHO is for a week, and then they'd confer on a subject and then they'd go back again. That's very expensive, but it's also not continuous, and you need to be able to collaborate on an ongoing basis with your team. So if you think about the possibilities, you have avatars going into the metaverse, you have digital whiteboards, project, whatever you need to be able to collaborate spaces. You might have a digital twin of some particular complicated hospital or procedure that you're building, and people can be working on that on an ongoing basis over a period of time. So that's one. I think the second one, which is super exciting, is around education, because it's going to allow things like students to go inside the human body and see it as it is, to be
Oh
able
yeah.
to, be a surgeon operating on a patient and not be able to kill the patient, doing like a real time complex procedure,
Sure.
and they can never kill the patient, but they can be as if they were the surgeon during doing the operation. And so I think those kinds of learning experiences are going to make better clinicians, because they're going to be
Sure.
able to be part of it. But also, people are developing the possibility using AR and VR that a surgeon operating on a body can basically have an overlay, a virtual overlay of exactly that patient's CAT scan or um, radiology while they're operating, so it'll make for more precision medicine. So then moving on to things like health and wellness, um, using the combination. I mean, you can have virtual avatars doing your fitness for you, you can have them doing your education for you on diet and exercise, but people are also making now these earn to exercise games where you have fun, you play a game, you've got battle creatures, but they
Sure.
only get stronger and better if you do exercise, and that's monitored through wearables. So there's all these possibilities of using gamification, to be able to incentivize people to get fit, lose weight, and so forth. And with blockchain, the possibility, obviously, of creating the token economy within the metaverse so people can be rewarded for whatever it is that they're doing, opens up a whole realm of possibilities. So I think that's just one industry, but I'll just add about social prescribing, which is not something we have in US or Australia, but they have it in the UK. And this is recognizing that a patient might present at a health facility, but that's not their only problem. They might have financial problems, they might have homelessness
Interesting.
problems, they
Yeah,
might have mental health, alcoholism. And so, what happens with social prescribing is that they see a care worker, and that care worker looks at all of the causes
oh
of
wow,
their,
very
and then
holistic.
it is, but if you think that's possible in a metaverse environment, you can get put in touch with community groups, you can get put in touch with
Right.
Alcoholics Anonymous, you can put in touch with people who help with your housing or and so forth. So it just kind of and you haven't had to go down from one department to another to another to another. It's all in one
Sure.
place. And the city of Seoul in South Korea has announced it's going to put its government services into the metaverse. And I think as this is all still a concept and it's all still a little bit futuristic, but if you think about the possibilities of creating efficiency and transparency in government services and allowing people to link with many, many government departments using one identity, it really could improve the quality of services that are provided for citizens.
That is incredible. And in fact, I think what the UK is doing, and this is the first time I'm hearing it, social prescribing, that actually makes a tremendous amount of sense. And and I would imagine if there's any detractors to this, I would say this actually saves money in the long run. If that's going to be one of the arguments, if you're actually to meet with these individual patients and actually troubleshoot and diagnose all of these problems going on in, let's say, different facets of their life, I mean, these things are all connected. Your financial your financial health is, for, it's either going to, increase your stress, if it's very, vulnerable and whatnot, and things like alcoholism, or if there's any other drug addictions in the background, that's also going to prevent your recovery for, greater injuries as well. I mean, if you get into a car accident and you've broken a femur or you have some sort of internal bleeding, alcoholism is going to greatly stagnate healing of those, let's say, in organs or bones and muscle tissue and whatnot. So that is actually a great idea, and that's sort of something I definitely want to research a bit more, about as well. So definitely,
But I
that is
think to
quite
your
valuable there.
point, that
Yes.
what I try and do and what I think those of us who sort of have a concept about what's going on with Web3 and the metaverse is try to imagine how it can impact on different industries or on different things
Right.
that people want to do in a good way. And I think that there's tremendous opportunity, and people are starting to come and say, help me think this through. And I think that those of us who are just a little bit ahead of the curve in the sense that we've been thinking about the metaverse and Web3, for 6 months longer than anyone else. No one's an
Sure.
expert. It's everyone's
Sure.
developing it as we go.
Oh yeah.
And just share those. Here's a possibility you could think about. Here's how you might do it. Here's what it could do for your industry. I think there's tremendous potential, because I think lack of education, both about blockchain, metaverse, Web3, DeFi, is one of the biggest barriers to social understanding and social uptake. So I think there's a huge role for just helping people understand, and not understanding a Merkle tree or a hard fork or a soft
Sure.
fork or all of these terms that we use, but just
Right.
like, for my life, how could this actually be better for me?
Very, very well said. I certainly think if there is a way to make this subject matter a bit more digestible and just easy on the listener, so to say, I think that will be half the battle, as far as mass adoption and really communicating the true value of of this technology, to say the very least. And I think, especially given the fact that you've been in this space for quite a while, this makes you like virtually like a veteran, like Merlin, to be honest. Like, I think even 2 years is kind of a long time for anybody to be in this space to be in this space as well. So I think that's incredible. And as far as like other industries, like how do you think this is going to transform social media? Do you think the metaverse is going to be the new social media? As far as, are we really going to almost have this gamified experience using avatars are almost like these 3D, VR, AR video game characters as we communicate and interact with each other, like on Twitter or on Instagram,
Well, I
something like
think
that.
what will change, and this is the big change that's kind of coming, because at the moment, social media is essentially all controlled by centralized organizations who are
Yes,
extractive, if I could say that, and they take the data and they use it, and they charge fees and they advertise and so forth. I think that what we're seeing, and I won't use the term social media, but we're seeing the development of these community-owned economies and social tokens that allow people to engage socially in subjects they want to, or groups that they want to, or get closer access to, film stars, pop stars, and people that
sure.
they want to be part of. So I think what we're going to see is the growth of these community economies that interact with social tokens, where all parties can benefit from being part of this community. And I think that that's the change we'll see. In terms of where and how we socialize, that's going to be a choice, and people are going to, there's 160 plus companies building metaverses at the moment. We're just not all going to spin through those 160 metaverses.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
we're going to be looking for communities that are like our tribe, where we want to be part of it, where we identify with their values or their brand or whatever it is that they're about, and they're the ones that we're going to go into, and we're going to meet old friends and we're going to meet new friends,
Yeah.
and people are going to spend time there. But it's not like we're never going to see another real person again. Of course not. We are real people, and we've got human relations with people, and it'll just be a, kind of a closer merging of the virtual and the physical. And the one that I love so much, because, any woman that's had to go into a store and try underwear on knows how absolutely humiliating that is. So just imagine, you can send your exactly fit for purpose avatar to your measurements into the shop, try on
Oh,
all
that's
the
a good point.
bikinis that you'd never be game to try on as a human being,
Sure.
order the pair that you like, and have them delivered to you, the real person, in the correct size. I mean, that's so cool. And I'm sure we'll all be doing that, especially for underwear. But, I think it's just the opportunities that this is going to provide. We need to, and people are imagining them. These 160 companies are trying to build metaverses that will appeal to whatever constituency that they're trying to appeal to. And we're going to find that. And it's early days yet. And I think that, again, as these communities are forming, we can understand how they work, how their tokens operate, how their rewards and incentives operate, how their sanctions operate, and we can keep on learning more and more what people want and how to keep people safe. And on that point, just to raise the issue of ethics,
Yes, please.
because yeah, there's a lot of risks, and metaverse introduces even more risk, because not only is it going to monitor the things that we do spend money on and so forth, because it will often be connected with wearables, it will be monitoring physiological responses, so they'll have a lot more knowledge and data on you, and issues like children in the metaverse. How do we keep them
Sure.
safe? How do we know an avatar is your avatar, not some bad actor's avatar? And do
Right.
avatars have rights? Can I kill your avatar? Is that okay? So I think there's lots of questions
Right.
that we need to be seriously thinking about, and seriously encouraging those who are building these new worlds to think about and bake into the code, because that's the challenge with digital ethics, because one algorithm can make decisions that affect millions of people, so we
Oh,
don't want to
sure.
be it.
And it also makes me wonder too, especially based on some of those issues that can come up. What is that going to do with? I guess you could say, as far as death threats or sexual harassment. If somebody is, let's say, if somebody's, let's say, harming your avatar in, let's say, the form of either violence or sexual violence, what are the effects going to be on the user, and how is society, or how is the metaverse going to be able to deal with a lot of those problems? Because if it is your likeness, it is something that you're going to be affected by, based on how other people, let's say, treat that likeness. So whether, let's say, I have an avatar or you have an avatar, I think both you or I would have a certain strong reaction if, let's say, somebody was able to harm that likeness or humiliate that likeness, especially where thousands and greater people can actually witness and see that.
No, I think that that's a very legitimate and serious question. And I think it's incredibly important that we put these out in the public domain and that we're discussing it. Because we have, for example, there's no code of ethical standards for software developers. There's not a
That's a
kind of,
very good
you know,
point.
how you
Yeah.
have, yeah, you know, doctors have the
Right. They have the Hippocratic
societies.
Oath, and lawyers have,
Exactly. So
yeah,
this,
essentially the professional code of
yeah, so
conduct.
I think there's some real room to move, both in terms of thinking about. But I mean, I read a study where they said 80% of software developers would be happy to think about ethics in programming, but they're not taught about it. So how do we teach them about it? You know, so I think there's a
Right.
whole lot of questions about that, and I think there's questions about. How you apply any sort of global standards or national standards, in terms of protection of avatar rights, if that's what we need to do. I just think it's too early to give you a list of 10 things we should do, but I'm pretty confident in saying we need to be outlining what the possible
Right.
threats and negative consequences are, and we need to be planning for those things to be mitigated now.
Right. And as far as, let's say, the metaverse, and I think you mentioned this good point, as far as children, I guess the way they interact with the metaverse, that is going to be a whole other, you could say, obstacle, and you could say mission to overcome as well. So many different types of issues arise from that. And of course, on one hand, you want to allow people certain freedoms to either express their creativity or even participate in commerce. On the other hand, there is also the very, very, there is the high concern and interest towards protecting the minor in this space as well from malicious actors and whatnot. So that is going to be a very, very uh, that it's going to be a very difficult journey to kind of traverse that terrain. But I'm very optimistic. I feel we will get there. Um,
Well, we put out a book last year called Applied Ethics in a Digital World, and it was a collection of chapters. And one of the chapters was about digital ethics and the rights of children. And it was like really, really interesting read because
right.
it takes quite a different perspective from the one that we tend to come from, which is if they're minors, then the parents and the state get to decide. So
Sure.
I just think there's a lot of thinking to be done about this. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that we need to start thinking about it and working it through, because it will most definitely be a challenge that we're already facing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm also a father as well, and I have a 4-year-old. So certainly as time goes on, I'm probably going to develop some very, very strong opinions as far as metaverse usage, or whether this is involving an Oculus or some sort of head accessory, and I guess you could say the types of channels and content coming through that as well. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how this manifests over the next few years, and how it's going to be handled at a state level, at a country level, at a by regulatory organizations and whatnot. So these are all excellent points you certainly raised. And going forward, what do you have in store for the rest of 2022 between I guess you could say your various ventures and projects? You're certainly like I said, you certainly have a hand in many things, and you certainly wear many hats. So what exciting things do you have on the horizon?
Well, we're writing a book on Web3. It's been accepted by a publisher. So
Excellent.
before the end of the year, hopefully third quarter, that's going to be out. And that's part of, my mission for education. I'm also, because living in the UAE, they have the presidency of the COP, which is the big climate conference in 2023. So we're really trying to generate a lot of interest and activity around blockchain for climate action, because people's minds are obviously galvanized around that. And I'm the chief editor of a UN environment report on digitization and the environment for West Asia, which is the Middle East. And then, of course, with Kasei Holdings, I guess, like, everyone else in the crypto world, we're just bunkering down and holding tight and seeing what's happening in the markets and hoping that they
Right.
come back again.
Right, and yeah, and I think for many in the space, I don't get the impression people are too distressed. I think inevitably things will certainly bounce back, and it's going to be exciting. I think maybe as such, the allure of blockchain is really you don't really entirely know what's going to happen. Maybe for better or for worse. So there's a lot of possibility for both, good and perhaps disastrous things as well. But I do think it's certainly a risk worth, exploring, given the amount of potential for good it has.
It's a very exciting world. And as you say, just ending on that potential for good, that's what inspires me and keeps me going, because there are so many incredible people that I meet, both in US, UK, Australia, Middle East, Asia, Africa, who are really putting their minds to how this technology can make things better across industries for financial inclusion, humanitarian, climate. And that's exciting and that's inspiring. And I think we should just keep on trying to do that and shine a light on the great projects and great people who are doing that.
Beautifully said. I don't think I can add anything to that that could certainly, top that sentiment. Dr. Thomason, thank you so much for coming on today, and I really do appreciate you, spending your time with me today on this episode to, provide your insights on these, various things, because it's, these insights, these analyses. This is going to give people the context to be interested and eventually start building a greater, understanding. And like you said, it probably doesn't do a whole lot of good towards, you could say, the messaging if, droning on, Merkle trees and nodes and what hashing is. I think for a lot of people, there's not enough context, to kind of place that in their lives. But, providing, you could say, these very thoughtful, you could say, analysis on various you could say global things. This is going to be the hook that's going to really, I think, start people's journey towards determining or ascertaining uh, where their interest lies, in this space as well. So, like I said, I'm very happy to have you, back on. And, of course, it was wonderful, participating in the global cryptocurrency conference, digitally in Dubai with you as well. I certainly had a great time doing that with you, and I'm looking forward to your book. Please let me know when your book comes out. I definitely want to buy a copy, and I do love reading physical hard copy books. So half of my place is really just one big library to begin with. So keep me posted on that.
Thank you so much. And it's great talking with you.
Likewise, Dr. Thomason. Thank you again, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Bye.